The stars had always been humanity's dream. For 300 years they had reached outward, building homes on distant worlds and making friends with alien species who shared their curiosity about the universe. By the year 2347, humans lived on 12 different star systems. They had cities on moons, stations floating in the darkness between worlds, and ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of centuries. It was a golden age, and most people believed it would last forever. They were wrong. Admiral Danny Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant Star, watching his sensor screens with growing dread. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles, but nothing in his long career had prepared him for what he was seeing now. 10,000 alien warships hung in space near Earth. They had appeared without warning, dropping out of faster than light travel. In perfect formation, each ship was massive, covered in dark armor that seemed to swallow light itself. They belonged to the Velari Dominion, an empire that had conquered over 300 worlds across the galaxy. No species had ever defeated them. No species had ever even come close, sir, said Lieutenant Pete Dawson, his voice shaking slightly. We're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast to every human world simultaneously. Danny nodded. Slowly put it on screen. The image that appeared was not human. The Velari were tall and thin with pale blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They had no hair, and their mouths were filled with small, sharp teeth. The one speaking wore elaborate robes decorated with symbols that Danny assumed represented conquered worlds. I am Supreme Commander Calvorak of the Velari Dominion, the alien said. His voice was cold and emotionless. Translated into English by computer system, your species has been judged. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. Every human world will submit to Dominion rule. Your leaders will present themselves for processing. Your military forces will stand down. Your weapons will be destroyed. Calvorak paused, and something like amusement crossed his alien features. If you do not comply, we will destroy your worlds. One by one, we will hunt your ships. Across the galaxy, we will end your species entirely. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Danny stared at the empty screen for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited for orders, their faces pale with fear. He understood their terror. The Velari fleet was larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. By any logical measure, the war was already over, but Danny Cole had never been a man who accepted defeat easily. He opened a channel to Fleet Commander Sam Hartley, whose ship was positioned near Mars. Sam was younger than Danny, but just as stubborn. They had served together for 20 years and had become close friends. Sam, are you seeing this? Danny asked. I'm seeing it, Sam replied. His voice was grim but steady. What's your read on the situation? They expect us to surrender. They've done this to hundreds of species before. Show up with overwhelming force, demand submission, and watch everyone fall in line. And if we don't fall in line, Danny smiled slightly, then they'll try to make us. But I've been studying their battle records, Sam. Every species they've conquered gave up before the Real fighting started. The Velari have never faced an enemy who refused to quit. In another part of the solar system, Captain Kate Morrison was thinking the same thing. Kate commanded a smaller vessel, the Swift Arrow, and she had spent years studying alien species. She knew more about Velari psychology than almost anyone in the human fleet. They're arrogant, she said to her crew. They've won so many times that they've forgotten what it feels like to lose. They expect us to be afraid, and they expect fear to make us weak. Her first officer, a young man named Tony Blake, looked at her with worried eyes. But, Captain, their fleet is massive. How can we possibly fight them? Kate shook her head. We don't have to beat them today, Tony. We just have to survive. We have to show them that humans don't break easily, and then we have to find a way to hit them where it hurts. On Earth, the United Council met in emergency session. Politicians from every human world argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately, hoping that cooperation would save lives. Others wanted to fight, even though the odds seemed impossible. The debate grew heated, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Finally, an elderly woman named Governor Martha Powell stood up. She had led the colony on New Haven for 30 years, and her voice carried weight. I've lived my whole life building something for the next generation, she said quietly. My grandchildren live on New Haven. My great-grandchildren were born there. If we surrender, what kind of life will they have? Slaves to an alien empire, workers in their mines and factories. She shook her head. I would rather die free than live like that, and I believe most humans feel the same way. The vote was close, but in the end humanity chose to fight. Admiral Danny Cole was given the honor of sending the response. He stood on his bridge, looking out at the massive alien fleet, and he felt something unexpected. Not fear, but a strange kind of joy. This was the moment that would define humanity. This was when they would show the galaxy what they were made of. He opened a channel that would broadcast to every ship in the Velari fleet, and then he did something that no conquered species had ever done before. He laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a full, genuine laugh. His crew stared at him in confusion, but slowly they began to understand. They began to smile, and then they began to laugh too. The sound echoed across space, carried by radio waves to every vessel. 10,000 alien ships heard the sound of humans laughing at them. When Danny finally stopped, he spoke 6 simple words. Come and take it if you can. On the Velari command ship, Supreme Commander Calvarac watched the transmission with growing confusion. In 300 years of conquest, he had heard many things from defeated species. He had heard begging, pleading, crying, and screaming. He had heard desperate prayers to forgotten gods, but he had never heard laughter. What does this mean? He asked his advisors. Why do they laugh? None of them had an answer. Calvarac felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it, because he had not felt it in centuries. It was doubt. Perhaps he thought these humans would be different. Perhaps they would actually fight, but surely in the end they would fall like all the others. They had to. The Dominion was invincible, wasn't it? The countdown to humanity's destruction began. 48 hours remained, and somewhere in the darkness of space, humans prepared for the battle of their lives. They were afraid, they were outnumbered, they knew that many of them would die, but they were not broken, and they would not surrender, not now, not ever. The Velari did not wait for the deadline to pass. 12 hours after humanity's defiant response, they attacked. Admiral Danny Cole had expected this. He had positioned his fleet in defensive formations around Earth, hoping to buy time for civilians to evacuate to safer worlds, but even with all his preparation, nothing could have prepared him for the speed and violence of the Velari assault. Their weapons were unlike anything humans had faced before. Plasma beams that could cut through ship armor like paper, missiles that seemed to think for themselves, chasing targets through space with terrible precision. Gravity weapons that crushed entire vessels into twisted metal. The battle for Earth lasted 6 hours. When it was over, half of humanity's fleet was gone. Burning wreckage filled orbit around the planet. The Defiant Star survived, but barely. Danny Cole watched from his damaged bridge as Velari ground forces began landing on Earth's surface. All remaining ships fall back, he ordered, his voice with exhaustion and grief. Retreat to the asteroid belt. We regroup there. It was the hardest order he had ever given. He was abandoning Earth, the birthplace of humanity, leaving billions of people to face alien occupation. But he knew that if the fleet was destroyed completely, there would be no hope at all. They had to survive. They had to find another way. The weeks that followed were the darkest in human history. The Velari moved through human space with brutal efficiency, conquering one world after another. New Haven fell after 3 days of fighting. The colony on Kepler Prime lasted a week before its defenses collapsed. Mars held out for 12 days, its underground cities becoming death traps as Velari forces flooded them with poison gas. Billions died. The exact number would never be known. On the colony world of New Haven, Lieutenant Commander Ben Archer led desperate evacuation efforts. He was a pilot, one of the best in the fleet. But now he found himself on the ground helping civilians escape through underground tunnels while enemy forces advanced. "Keep moving," he shouted, waving people toward the waiting transport ships. "Don't stop for anything, just keep moving." The sky above was filled with fire. Velari bombers dropped plasma charges on the city, turning buildings to ash. Ben could hear the screams of people who didn't make it, people who were caught in the open when the bombs fell. His squadron had been assigned to protect the evacuation. 12 pilots, 12 fighters. Now only 3 remained. The others had died buying time for civilians to reach the tunnels. Lieutenant Archer, his radio crackled. It was Sergeant Maria Santos, one of his surviving pilots. "We've got enemy ground forces approaching from the east. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Ben looked at the crowd of people still waiting to board the transports. There were thousands of them. 15 minutes was not enough time. Hold them off, he ordered. "Whatever it takes, give these people a chance." Maria's voice was calm. "Understood, sir. It's been an honor." "Understood." She and the other pilot flew toward the advancing enemy. Ben never saw them again. The last transport lifted off just as Velari soldiers reached the evacuation point. Ben was the last person aboard, pulled inside by desperate hands as the doors closed behind him. Through the window, he watched New Haven burn. He had saved 3,000 people, but 10 million had been left behind, far from the front lines, in a hidden research facility deep Beneath the surface of Mars, two scientists worked frantically on a project that might change everything. Dr. Lisa Chen was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying alien species. She was small and quiet, with the kind of patience that came from years of careful research, but now there was no time for patience. Now she worked 20 hours a day, fueled by coffee and desperation. Her partner was Chris Santos, an engineer who had once designed civilian spacecraft. Now he built weapons. He was good at it, better than he had ever wanted to be. "I found something," Lisa said one night, staring at her computer screen with wide eyes. "Look at this." Chris walked over and looked at the data she was pointing to. It was analysis of Velari shield technology, gathered from wreckage of destroyed enemy ships. Their shields operate on a specific frequency, Lisa explained. It's incredibly sophisticated, almost impossible to penetrate with conventional weapons, but there's a flaw, a tiny gap in the frequency pattern that appears every few seconds. Chris studied the data carefully. If we could time a weapon to hit that gap, their shields would collapse. Their ships would be vulnerable. For the first time in weeks, Chris felt something like hope. Can we build something that can exploit this? Lisa nodded slowly. "I think so, but it would have to be delivered at very close range, almost suicide distance." Chris was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I'll start designing a new fighter, something small and fast that can get close enough to deliver the weapon." He paused. "We'll call it the Hornet." In the asteroid belt, Admiral Danny Cole gathered the survivors of humanity's fleet. It was a sad collection of damaged ships and exhausted crews hiding in the darkness between rocks the size of mountains. But it was something. It was a start. "We can't win a straight fight," Danny told his commanders during a strategy meeting. "We all know that, but we don't have to win a straight fight. We just have to survive long enough to find an advantage." Sam Hartley nodded in agreement. He had been wounded during the retreat from Earth, a plasma burn across his shoulder that still hadn't healed properly, but he refused to rest. There was too much work to do. "We need to rebuild," Sam said. "Hidden shipyards scattered across the belt. The Velari don't know this territory like we do. They won't find us if we're careful." Kate Morrison spoke up from her seat at the table. "We also need people, pilots, engineers, soldiers. Most of our military was destroyed in the first attacks. Then we train new ones," Danny replied. "Farmers, miners, teachers, anyone willing to learn, anyone willing to fight." Kate smiled slightly. "I'll start a training program. We might not have professional soldiers, but we'll have something better. We'll have people fighting for their homes." The meeting continued late into the night. Plans were made, resources were allocated. Hope, fragile but real, began to grow. On Earth, the Velari raised their flag over the ruins of New York City. Supreme Commander Calvarac declared victory, announcing that humanity had been defeated and would now serve the Dominion forever. But across the galaxy, in hidden bases and underground shelters, humans listened to his words and refused to believe them. They had lost battles. They had lost worlds. They had lost people they loved, but they had not lost the war. Not yet. In the darkness of the asteroid belt, the remnants of humanity's fleet worked through the night, repairing ships and building new ones. They trained and planned and waited for their chance, and slowly, quietly, they began to prepare their revenge. 6 months passed. The Velari controlled Earth and most of the human colonies. Their flags flew over ruined cities. Their soldiers patrolled empty streets. Their commanders declared that the war was over and that humans had been permanently defeated. But the war was not over. It had simply moved underground. Jake Torres crouched in the shadows of a collapsed building, watching a Velari patrol move down the street below. He was 28 years old, with dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death in the past 6 months. Before the invasion, he had been a mechanic fixing hover cars in a shop near the old Brooklyn Bridge. Now he led a resistance cell of 50 fighters, striking at the enemy whenever they could. Wait for it, he whispered into his radio. Let them pass the marker. The patrol consisted of 6 Thari soldiers and a small hover tank. They moved with the casual confidence of conquerors, not bothering to check the ruined buildings around them. They had grown comfortable. They believed humans were broken. That was their mistake. When the patrol reached the marker, Jake pressed a button on his detonator. Massive explosion ripped through the street, destroying the hover tank and throwing Velari soldiers through the air. Before they could recover, Jake's fighters emerged from hiding, firing weapons they had built from salvaged parts. The fight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, 6 enemy soldiers lay dead and Jake's team was already disappearing into the ruins. Good work, Jake said as they retreated through underground tunnels. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they send reinforcements. Let's move. His sister Me was waiting for them at the tunnel junction. She was 2 years younger than Jake, with the same dark hair and the same stubborn determination. While Jake fought the Velari directly, Mag ran an underground network that smuggled refugees out of occupied territory. I've got a transport ready, she said. 50 people heading to the outer settlements tonight, including 12 children. Jake nodded. Good. Every person we save is a victory. How was the ambush? Clean, no casualties on our side. Mag smiled slightly. Velari are getting nervous. I heard their commanders complaining that they can't stop the attacks. They don't understand why we won't just give up. Jake shrugged. They've never met humans before. They'll learn. Across the occupied territories, similar scenes played out every day. Resistance cells operated in every city, every colony, every place where Velari soldiers tried to impose their rule. They sabotaged supply lines. They assassinated commanders. They spread messages of hope to people who had almost forgotten what hope felt like. The Velari responded with increasing brutality. They executed prisoners publicly, hoping to terrify the population into submission. They imposed harsh curfews and punished entire communities for the actions of a few fighters. They brought in more soldiers, more weapons, more surveillance systems. None of it worked. Humans kept fighting in the asteroid belt. Admiral Danny Cole's hidden fleet was growing stronger every day. Ships that had been left for dead were rebuilt with salvaged parts. New vessels were constructed in secret shipyards carved into the hearts of asteroids. Volunteers arrived constantly, pilots and engineers, and soldiers who had escaped from occupied worlds. We now have 300 combat-capable ships, Sam Hartley reported during a command meeting, plus support vessels, transport ships, and the new Hornet fighters that Chris Santos designed. Kate Morrison added, the training program is ahead of schedule. We've got 2,000 new pilots ready for combat and another 3,000 in advanced training. Danny nodded, studying the strategic displays that showed the positions of Velari forces throughout human space. What about the weapon? Is it ready? Dr. Lisa Chen spoke up. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from months of endless work, but there was excitement in her voice. The shield disruption device is complete. We've tested it on captured equipment, and it works exactly as predicted. One hit from a Hornet and their shields collapse for approximately 30 seconds. 30 seconds is enough, Danny said. If we time our attacks correctly, that's all the window we need. The meeting continued as they planned their counteroffensive. It would require perfect coordination between the fleet attacks and resistance operations on the ground. Every human world would need to rise up simultaneously, forcing the Velari to divide their forces. It was incredibly risky. If anything went wrong, they might lose everything, but they had no choice. The longer they waited, the stronger the Velari occupation became. They had to strike now, while they still had the strength to fight on the Velari command ship above Earth. Supreme Commander Calvarac was growing frustrated. He had conquered hundreds of worlds, and none of them had caused him as much trouble as this one. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to accept defeat. Instead, they fought with a stubbornness that bordered on insanity. We executed 10,000 prisoners last week, one of his advisors reported. It had no effect. Resistance attacks actually increased. Then execute 20,000 this week, Calvarac growled. Commander, with respect, that approach isn't working. Humans seem to become more determined when we increase the pressure. It's as if pain makes them stronger. Calvarac slammed his fist against the arm of his command chair. That makes no sense. Every species responds to pain with fear. Fear leads to submission. It is the natural order. Perhaps, the advisor said carefully. Humans are not a natural species. Calvarac stared at him for a long moment. The advisor was right, though he hated to admit it. Humans were different from any enemy the Dominion had ever faced. They didn't behave according to the rules that governed other conquered peoples. Double the patrols in all occupied territories, Calvarac ordered. Increase surveillance. Find their hidden bases and destroy them, and begin preparations for a final sweep of the outer system. If there are human survivors hiding in the asteroids, I want them found and eliminated. Advisor bowed and left to carry out the orders. Calvarac turned to look out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were gathering. He could feel it. They were planning something, preparing for one last desperate attempt to change their fate. Let them come, he thought. Let them try. The Dominion had crushed rebellions before. This one would be no different. But deep in his chest, that unfamiliar feeling stirred again. That tiny seed of doubt that had been planted when humans first laughed at his ultimatum. What if he was wrong? What if these strange, stubborn, impossible creatures actually found a way to win? He pushed the thought away. It was ridiculous. The Dominion was invincible. Humans would fall like all the others. They had to. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt, Admiral Danny Cole finalized his battle plans. In 3 days, humanity would strike back. In 3 days, the galaxy would Learn what happened when you pushed. Humans too far, send the word to all. Resistance cells, Danny ordered. Tell them to be ready, tell them the time has come. Kate Morrison smiled. What should the message say? Danny thought for a moment, then he said, tell them we're coming home. The message spread across occupied space, passed from cell to cell, through secret channels and everywhere. It reached. Humans stopped what they were doing and smiled. They had waited 6 months for this moment. Now it was time to fight. The message reached every human in occupied space within 24 hours. It was simple. 3 days, be ready. Jake Torres received it while hiding in an abandoned subway station beneath New York City. He read it 3 times, feeling his heart beat faster with each reading. Then he gathered his resistance fighters and told them what was coming. This is it, he said, looking at the tired, determined faces around him. The fleet is coming back. Our job is to create chaos when they arrive. Draw the Velari ground forces away from the space battle. Make them fight on 2 fronts. Young woman named Rosa, who had lost her entire family in the invasion, raised her hand. What are our targets? Everything, Jake replied. Communication towers, supply depots, command posts. We hit them everywhere at once. We make them think the whole planet is rising up. The whole planet will be rising up, his sister Mag added. From the back of the room, I've been in contact with resistance cells in Europe, Asia, and South America. Everyone is ready. When the signal comes, we all attack together. The room fell silent as people absorbed the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't a small ambush or a quick raid. This was a full-scale uprising. Many of them would not survive, but no one asked to leave. No one suggested they hide instead. These were humans, and they had waited 6 months for a chance to fight back. In the asteroid belt, Admiral Danny Cole stood on the bridge of the Defiant Star, now fully repaired and upgraded with new weapons. Around him, 300 human warships waited in formation, their crews tense with anticipation. All ships report ready, Sam Hartley announced from his position at the tactical station. The Hornet squadrons are prepped and armed with shield disruption devices, Kate Morrison added. Resistance cells across all occupied worlds are standing by. They'll begin their attacks the moment we jump into the Sol system. Danny nodded slowly. This was the moment he had been waiting for since the day the Velari first appeared, the moment when humanity would finally strike back. Open a channel to all ships, he ordered. The communication officer complied, and Danny and LT Hunk and GT Y's voice echoed through every vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Cole. In a few minutes we will jump to Earth and engage the enemy. Many of us will not survive this battle. I won't pretend otherwise, but I want you to remember something. Remember why we're fighting. Remember the people we lost. Remember the homes that were taken from us. And remember that somewhere on Earth, on Mars, on every world the Velari conquered, our people are waiting for us. They're counting on us. They believe in us. He paused, feeling the weight of his words. Let's show them that their belief was not misplaced. Let's show the Velari what happens when you push humanity too far. All ships prepare to jump. Countdown began when the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. They appeared in a spread formation that made them look larger than they actually were. Kate Morrison had designed the patterned specifically to confuse enemy. Sensors making 300 ships look like 1,000. The effect was immediate. Velari forces across the system scrambled to respond, but their formations were scattered. They had been expecting scattered survivors, not a coordinated attack. On Earth, the resistance struck at the same moment. Jake Torres led an assault on the Velari command center in New York, while similar attacks erupted in hundreds of cities worldwide. Explosions lit up the night sky, gunfire echoed through empty streets. After 6 months of hiding, humans were finally fighting back openly. In space, the Hornet squadrons led the attack. Ben Archer, who had been rescued after the fall of New Haven and had spent months recovering and training, now flew the lead fighter. His hands were steady on the controls as he dove toward the first Velari warship. Hornet squadron weapons hot, he announced. Target their shields and fire on my mark. The small fighters screamed through space, dodging enemy fire with impossible agility. They were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Velari had seen before. Chris Santos had designed them perfectly. Mark, Ben shouted. 20 Hornets fired simultaneously. Their shield disruption weapons hit the Velari ship in perfect synchronization, and suddenly, impossibly, its protective barrier collapsed. Shields down, Ben reported. Main fleet, you have 30 seconds. The Defiant Star and its escorts opened fire without shields. The massive Velari warship was helpless. Plasma beams tore through its armor. Missiles punched deep into its hull. Within seconds, it was a burning wreck. For the first time in history, a Velari capital ship had been destroyed in combat, but the battle was far from over. The enemy fleet was still enormous, and they were recovering from their initial confusion. Velari commanders began organizing their forces, forming defensive formations. Around Earth, Admiral Danny Cole watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. Ships were dying on both sides, human and alien alike. The space around Earth was becoming a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. There, falling back toward the planet, Sam Hartley observed. Using Earth as a shield, Danny understood. Immediately, the Velari knew that humans would hesitate to fire near their own home world. They were trying to use Earth's population as protection. We need to clear their ground forces, Danny said. If we can eliminate their command structure on the surface, their fleet will lose coordination. Sam nodded grimly. I'll lead a strike team. Personally, we can drop through their defensive perimeter and hit their planetary headquarters. That's a suicide mission, Sam. Probably, but someone has to do it. Danny wanted to argue, but he knew Sam was right. The ground assault could change everything, and Sam was the best officer he had for this kind of operation. Take volunteers only, Danny ordered, and Sam come back alive. Sam smiled slightly. I'll do my best. 20 minutes later, Sam Hartley's transport broke through the Velari defensive line and entered Earth's atmosphere. 50 soldiers were packed inside, all volunteers, all knowing that their chances of survival were slim. They landed hard near the Velari Planetary Command Center, which had been built on the ruins of the United Nations headquarters in New York. Enemy fire greeted them immediately, but they pushed forward, fighting through the streets with desperate determination. On the ground nearby, Jake Torres saw the transport descend. He didn't know who was inside, but he knew they needed help. Change of plans, he shouted to his fighters were supporting that landing. Team move. The resistance fighters converged on the Velari headquarters from 3 directions, drawing enemy attention away from Sam's team. It was chaotic and bloody, with humans dying in the streets, but it worked. Sam's soldiers breached the building's outer defenses. Inside they fought room by room, corridor by corridor. Sam took a plasma burn to his leg, but kept moving, limping forward on pure determination. Finally, they reached the command center. The equipment inside controlled every Velari operation on Earth. Sam placed explosive charges on every console, every communication relay, every power conduit. Everyone out, he ordered. Now they made it to the street. Just as the building exploded behind them, the blast was visible from orbit. In space, the Velari fleet suddenly lost coordination. Their movements became confused, their attacks uncoordinated. Without commands from the ground, they didn't know what to do. Admiral Danny Cole saw his opportunity. All ships, he ordered, full attack. Push them back. The human fleet surged forward, and the final battle for Earth truly began. The battle for Earth raged across the sky. From the ground, it looked like the stars themselves were at war, with bright flashes of light marking the deaths of ships and the lives of thousands. Humans and Velari fought with everything they had, neither side willing to surrender. Admiral Danny Cole commanded from the bridge of the Defiant Star, issuing orders that sent ships into desperate attacks and defensive formations. His fleet had been reduced to 200 vessels, but the Velari had suffered worse. Their mighty armada, once 10,000 strong, had lost more than half its number to human weapons and human determination. The enemy flagship is moving to the front, reported Lieutenant Pete Dawson, the Throne of Dominion Supreme Commander. Calvarek is leading the counterattack. Personally, Danny stared at the sensor display. The Velari flagship was massive, 3 times larger than any human ship. It was covered in heavy armor and protected by shield generators that seemed immune to the Hornet weapons. This was the heart of the enemy fleet, the symbol of Velari power. If we destroy that ship, we break their will to fight, Danny said quietly. All squadrons focus on the flagship. We end this now. The human fleet converged on the Throne of Dominion. Hornet fighters dove toward it from every angle, trying to find weak points in its shields. Larger ships pounded it with plasma fire and missiles, but the flagship endured, its weapons cutting down human vessels with terrible efficiency. Then the Defiant Star took a direct hit. The impact threw Danny across the bridge. Alarm screamed. Crew members shouted. Damage reports. One entire section of the ship was open to space, killing 30 people instantly. Engines are failing, someone yelled. We're drifting toward the enemy flagship. Danny pulled himself to his feet, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Through the cracked view screen, he could see the Throne of Dominion looming closer. The 2 ships were going to collide. All hands prepare for impact, he ordered, and prepare boarding parties. If we can't destroy them from outside, we'll destroy them from within. The collision tore both ships open. Metal screamed against metal as the vessels ground together. Human soldiers poured through the breach, fighting hand-to-hand with Velari warriors in the twisted corridors between the ships. Danny led one of the boarding teams personally. He was too old for this kind of fighting, his body aching from wounds and exhaustion. But he refused to stay behind. This was humanity's moment, and he would be part of it deep in the wreckage in a space where the two ships had become one. Danny Cole came face to face with Supreme Commander Calvarac, the Velari leader, was wounded, pale blue blood leaking from cuts across his body, but he still stood tall, a plasma blade humming in his hand. "You should have surrendered," Calvarac said, his voice filled with rage. "You would have lived as slaves. But you would have lived. Now your species will be destroyed completely." Danny laughed. It was the same laugh he had broadcast 6 months ago, the laugh that had confused the Velari and given humanity hope. "You still don't understand us," Danny replied. "We don't just want to live, we want to live free. And we're willing to die for that freedom." "Can you say the same about your soldiers? Do they fight because they believe in something or just because they're ordered to?" For a moment, Calvarac hesitated. In that moment, Danny attacked. The fight was brutal and short. Danny was older and slower, but he had something Calvarac lacked, nothing to lose. He took a wound to his side that would probably kill him, but he kept fighting. He drove the Velari commander back, step by step. "Your empire is finished," Danny gasped, pressing his advantage. "Even if you kill me, even if you win this battle, you've already lost." Other species have seen humans fight. They've seen that the Velari can be beaten. Rebellions will spread across your territory. Your dominion will crumble. Calvarac's eyes widened with sudden fear. He knew Danny was right. Before either of them could strike a final blow, reinforcements arrived. Kate Morrison burst through a nearby doorway leading a squad of human soldiers. They had tracked Danny and LT Unk and GTY's signal through the wreckage. "Admiral, get back," Kate shouted, raising her weapon. Danny collapsed against a wall, his strength finally failing. Kate's soldiers surrounded Calvarac, their weapons aimed at his heart. Supreme Commander looked at the humans around him. He saw no fear in their eyes, only determination, only the absolute refusal to submit. Slowly he lowered his blade. "I surrender," he said, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. "Tell your fleet the battle is over." On the ground below, Sam Hartley lay in the rubble of the destroyed Velari headquarters. His wounds were severe and he could barely move, but he was alive. A figure appeared above him. It was Mag Torres, Jake's sister, her face covered in dust and blood. "Hold on," she said, pulling him to his feet. "We're getting you out of here." "The battle," Sam gasped. "What happened?" Mag smiled through her tears. "We won. The Velari are surrendering. It's over. We actually won." Sam felt something break inside him, not pain, but relief. 6 months of fighting. 6 months of loss and grief and endless struggle, and now it was finally over. In the skies above Earth, the Velari fleet was standing down. Ships that had been moments from destroying each other now floated silently in space. Fighting stopped. The killing stopped. Admiral Danny Cole survived his wounds. Though doctors said it was a miracle, he broadcast one final message from his hospital bed, a message that would be heard across the galaxy. "We are humans. We don't surrender, we don't submit, and if you come for us again, we will do exactly what we did today. We will laugh, we will fight, and we will win." The message spread to worlds humanity had never visited. to species that had lived under Velari rule for centuries. They heard about the small species that had dared to defy the invincible empire. They heard about humans who laughed at their would-be conquerors and then defeated them. Against impossible odds, on a dozen worlds, resistance movements began to stir. On Earth, humans began to rebuild. The cities were in ruins and millions had died. Recovery would take generations, but people emerged from hiding, blinking in the sunlight, looking up at a sky that was finally free of enemy ships. Jake and Magtor stood together on the Brooklyn Bridge, watching the sunrise. The bridge was damaged, partially collapsed but still standing. What happens now? Me asked. Jake put his arm around his sister. We rebuild. We remember, and we make sure this never happens again. In the months that followed, humanity established new defenses and new alliances. Species that had been afraid of the Velari now sought friendship with the humans who had defeated them. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. Admiral Danny Cole retired from active service but remained an advisor to the new human government. Kate Morrison took command of the rebuilt fleet. Sam Hartley recovered from his wounds, trained the next generation of soldiers, and Ben Archer, the pilot who had led the first successful attack against Velari shields, became a legend. Children across human space learned his name and dreamed of flying among the stars. The age of human defiance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the